What if the fears, distractions, and chaotic thoughts you experience daily aren't entirely your own? What if something unseen has been influencing humanity from the shadows for thousands of years? In ancient Gnostic texts, we find mention of mysterious entities called ARCHONs, a word that means rulers in Greek, but in this context, they are much more than political figures. They are described as cosmic parasites, born from a distortion in the fabric of the universe itself, whose sole purpose is to keep human consciousness trapped in illusion, fear, and forgetfulness. These beings don't need physical bodies. They operate in the mental and astral realms, subtly whispering into the minds of humanity, feeding off of negative energy, and enforcing a spiritual system of control. Today, many spiritual seekers unknowingly battle the very forces described in these ancient texts, forces that manipulate thoughts, distort perception, and keep people locked in loops of suffering and distraction. If you've ever felt like something is deliberately pulling you away from your spiritual path, you're not alone. Understanding the Archons isn't just some esoteric exercise. It's essential for reclaiming your inner sovereignty and seeing through the veil of illusion that surrounds our reality. In this video, we'll uncover the full story of the Archons, their origins, how they manipulate the world, and most importantly, how you can recognize and overcome their influence. Because only when you know what you're up against can you begin to truly awaken. To understand the Archons, we must journey back to a time. Before time, a mythic age not of Earth, but of the cosmic mind itself. In the mystical cosmology of the Gnostics, the universe began not with a bang, but with a divine dream, emanations of light from the source, or what they called the true God, also known as the monad. From this infinite source came countless divine beings, called ions, who dwelled in harmony within the pleroma, the fullness, the realm of pure spirit. Among these eons was Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom. But Sophia made a grave mistake. In a burst of passion and curiosity, she attempted to create without her divine counterpart, an act that fractured the cosmic balance. The result of this solitary act was the birth of a malformed being, Yaldabaoth, the first Archon. He was a blind, arrogant entity, unaware of the greater realms above him. Thinking himself a god, Yaldabaoth proclaimed, "I am God, and there is no other beside me," echoing verses later, found in mainstream religious texts. But this was not the voice of the true source. It was the delusion of a being cut off from light. Yaldabaoth then created his own realm, a false material universe, a dim reflection of the divine pleroma. And from his essence, he spawned the Archons, a host of subordinate rulers designed to maintain control over this counterfeit world. These Archons were not creators in the true sense. They were imitators, counterfeiters of the divine order. Lacking the spark of spirit, they could not create souls, only mechanical, soulless patterns, systems, dogmas, power structures. Their goal was to trap the divine spark within human beings, keeping it bound to the material realm through fear, distraction, and illusion. In the Gnostic view, Earth itself was crafted as a spiritual prison, not by the true God, but by Yaldabaoth and his archonic agents. This perspective challenges almost every conventional religious narrative. It suggests that the God worshipped by institutions throughout history may in fact be a false God, a shadow of the original source. And it paints a very different picture of human purpose, not to obey this world, but to transcend it, to awaken and return to the light. The Archons have no power over those who remember who they truly are. But for the vast majority of humanity who live unaware of this cosmic drama, the Archons operate in silence, controlling from behind the curtain. Knowing where they come from is the first step to unraveling their influence and reclaiming the sovereignty that has always been yours. In the grand architecture of the cosmos, everything has its place, or so it seems. But within the Gnostic cosmology, the Archons represent a distortion within that hierarchy. Unlike the divine aeons, who dwell in the pleroma and radiate harmony, the Archons exist in a liminal zone, a kind of metaphysical middle ground between pure spirit and dense matter. They operate in the psycho-spiritual planes, close enough to influence human consciousness, yet far enough from the light to remain in darkness themselves. Created by Yaldabaoth, the false god, who ignorantly believed himself to be the only deity, the Archons were born, not out of wisdom, but error and arrogance. Their existence is parasitic. They do not create, they control. Within the Gnostic mythos, Yaldabaoth declared himself ruler over the material cosmos. He appointed the Archons as his administrators, each given dominion over planets, elements, and even aspects of human experience. They became the governors of fate, time, and structure, the architects of a simulated reality that mimics divine order while lacking its essence. This is why Gnostics often referred to our world as a prison planet, not because nature itself is evil, but because the invisible infrastructure behind it has been manipulated to suppress true awareness. The Archons are not demons in the traditional religious sense. They are cosmic bureaucrats enforcing the illusion of separation. Their role is to maintain the veil of forgetfulness that clouds human perception. Through distraction, division, and distortion, they keep the soul asleep, trapped in cycles of birth suffering and spiritual amnesia. According to Gnostic writings, they feed off fear, pain, and confusion, which are abundant in a world ruled by lies. Their power is not direct violence, but influence implanting false narratives, sustaining systems of control, and corrupting the flow of divine intuition. You can see echoes of archonic influence in dogmatic religion, where rigid obedience is valued over inner knowing. You see it in corrupt institutions, where hierarchy replaces empathy. And you see it in modern life, where time scarcity, material obsession, and digital overload keep us distracted from the stillness within. These are not just cultural developments. They may be the evolution of an ancient strategy, refined to keep consciousness fragmented and docile. Yet even as they pose as rulers, the Archons fear one thing above all: the awakening of Gnosis, direct inner knowing of the divine beyond their reach. They fear the individual who reclaims their sovereignty and pierces through illusion. Because when you remember your origin in the pleroma, when you see the matrix for what it is, the Archons lose their grip. Their power is real, but it is entirely dependent on ignorance. The moment we stop consenting to their influence is the moment their false hierarchy begins to crumble. If the Archons are real, then how do they actually affect us? Unlike mythological demons that storm the gates with fire and fury, the Archons are far more insidious. Their power lies not in overt destruction, but in subtle manipulation, in the planting of thoughts, in the distortion of perception, and in the quiet erosion of your inner truth. Their goal is not to destroy humanity, but to enslave it from within, turning sovereign souls into obedient, disconnected beings who forget their origin and doubt their power. The Gnostics taught that archons infiltrate the mind, not the body. They exploit the gap between thought and awareness. You may hear them as the voice of self-doubt, the irrational fear before a leap of faith, or the sudden wave of shame that paralyzes you into inaction. These are not random emotional surges. They are engineered responses designed to lower your vibration and keep you tethered to fear, guilt, and confusion. The archons don't create new thoughts. They recycle familiar wounds, magnifying past traumas and reinforcing limiting beliefs. Over time, this shapes your inner reality, and by extension, your outer one. But their influence extends far beyond the individual mind. The archons operate through systems and structures, religions that demand obedience, rather than awakening governments that trade freedom for false security education that discourages questioning, and media that floods consciousness with fear, distraction, and division. These mechanisms aren't always consciously malicious, but they reflect an archonic blueprint: hierarchy over harmony, control over creativity, fear over love. Even modern technologies, while neutral by design, have become tools for disconnection, pulling people away from introspection and into the noise of algorithmic conditioning. One of the most dangerous tactics of the archons is their ability to mimic the voice of the divine. This is the false light phenomenon, where a seeker believes they've encountered a higher power, but in truth, they've been ensnared by an archonic projection. These beings know how to speak in spiritual tones, how to wear the mask of angels, and how to present illusion as insight. This is why Gnosticism warned against external worship and emphasized inner gnosis, because the only true guidance comes from within, not from visions or voices that may be laced with deception. And yet, despite their deep infiltration, the archons are not all powerful. Their influence is entirely dependent on our unconscious agreement. The more aware you become, the more their grip weakens. When you observe your thoughts without identification, when you question inherited systems, when you choose stillness over stimulation, you disrupt the patterns they rely on. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. And this is precisely why the archons fear human awakening more than anything else. Because when enough people begin to see through the illusion, their ancient machinery of control starts to unravel. The archons influence humanity by sowing inner chaos and outer order, just enough comfort to keep you from rising, just enough fear to keep you from questioning. But once you see the pattern, once you realize the voice of doubt is not your own, you begin to reclaim something. They cannot touch your inner sovereignty, your light, and your right to remember who you truly are. Many people today sense that something is deeply wrong with the world, that reality feels artificial, manipulated, even scripted. This intuition isn't new. Long before the term matrix became popularized by Hollywood, ancient Gnostic texts spoke of a false reality constructed by the archons, a kind of spiritual simulation designed to enslave human consciousness. What we perceive as the material world is, in this view, not the true reality, but a mirror world, a carefully engineered illusion designed to keep souls asleep. The archons are the architects of this matrix. But unlike machines in a dystopian film, their tools are subtle, yet powerful belief systems: language, thought loops, social conditioning, and energetic manipulation. Their aim is to disconnect you from the divine spark within replacing authentic spiritual experience with artificial frameworks, religion as ritual without soul education, as memorization without wisdom, work as survival without meaning. They create just enough comfort and convenience to keep people from questioning while flooding the senses with distraction to suppress critical thought. Every layer of the matrix, from government to entertainment to economy, serves the same purpose: to anchor your awareness in the outer world and keep your inner truth buried beneath noise. In this system, time becomes a prison. The Archons use it as a tool of control, trapping souls in linear thinking, in cycles of urgency, regret, and anticipation. The constant rush of not enough time pulls us away from the eternal now, where truth actually resides. Similarly, the idea of identity is weaponized. You are taught to define yourself by your race, nationality, gender, occupation, fragmenting the self into labels. The more divided you are, the easier you are to control. This is the genius of the archonic matrix. It makes the cage invisible and even convinces you that it's your home. Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of the matrix is the illusion of choice. You're told you're free to choose, but only between pre-selected options: left or right, science or religion, work or poverty. None of these paths lead to sovereignty because all are still within the cage. Gnosticism called this the world of appearances, a place ruled by rulers who offer freedom only in form, never in essence. And yet there are cracks in the matrix. Moments of déjà vu intuition, synchronicity, or spontaneous insight. These are not glitches, but reminders from your true self that there is more. When you meditate, fast, or break patterns of consumption, the veil begins to thin. You catch glimpses of the pleroma, the realm beyond this synthetic reality. You begin to ask the forbidden questions. Who am I really? What is this place? Who benefits from my ignorance? The Archons have invested millennia into building this system, but they rely on one critical factor: your belief in it. The matrix is not sustained by their power, it's sustained by your agreement. Every time you obey out of fear, conform without questioning, or distract yourself from your soul's whisper, you reinforce the walls. But every time you remember, question, and awaken, those same walls begin to crack. This is how the system of control unravels, not through rebellion, but through remembrance. The matrix is not the final reality. It's a test, a challenge, a labyrinth designed to wake you up. And once you see it for what it is, you are no longer just a player in their game. You become a sovereign, being one who sees through illusion and walks freely beyond the bounds of false creation. Once you realize the matrix is not the ultimate reality, and the Archons are not divine, but distortions, what then awareness alone is not enough. To break free from archonic influence, one must actively reclaim their sovereignty. The Gnostics didn't just identify the prison, they offered keys to unlock it. These were not rituals or doctrines, but inner technologies of awakening, timeless strategies for spiritual liberation that remain just as relevant today. The core of Gnostic liberation lies in gnosis, not belief, but direct experiential knowledge of the divine. Gnosis doesn't come from external texts or teachers. It comes from within through deep inner silence, contemplation, and the stripping away of illusion. The Archons operate in the realm of thought. Gnosis begins in the stillness beyond thought. This is why meditation, or what the Gnostics might call inner remembering is a powerful act of rebellion. In the stillness of the present moment, free from mental noise, you begin to see what is real and what is programmed. You begin to hear your own soul again, unfiltered, unmediated. Another essential strategy is discernment, the ability to distinguish your true inner guidance from archonic interference. Not every thought, feeling, or vision is yours. Ask yourself, does this thought lead to fear, shame, or paralysis? Or does it lead to expansion, clarity, and peace? The Archons speak in urgency and anxiety. The divine speaks in quiet knowing. Developing this subtle awareness is how you reclaim your mental sovereignty and stop being a puppet of unseen forces. The Gnostics also emphasized emotional mastery. Archons feed on emotional volatility, fear, rage, envy, despair. By cultivating inner balance, you deny them sustenance. This isn't about suppression, but about awareness without identification. Feel your emotions fully, but don't let them define you. Practice observing them like clouds passing through the sky. This emotional detachment weakens the archonic grip and strengthens your inner clarity. Knowledge without action, however, is still illusion. Liberation requires courage. Courage to walk away from inherited systems, to question long-held assumptions, and to live in alignment with truth, even when it's inconvenient. It may mean saying no to toxic relationships, leaving institutions that drain your spirit, or confronting the false narratives you've accepted about yourself. The path is not easy, but every act of truth is a rupture in the matrix. Every choice rooted in awareness weakens the web. Gnostics also understood the importance of community, but not in the traditional sense. They gathered not to worship a god, but to remind each other of who they truly were. In today's world, connecting with like-minded souls, people who value awareness, authenticity, and inner work, can accelerate your liberation. Not because they save you, but because they mirror your awakening and help you stay grounded in your truth. Finally, remember, liberation is not a destination. It's a process, a discipline, a way of being. The Archons will not vanish overnight. Their influence may still whisper in your mind. But the more you choose presence over programming, clarity over confusion, sovereignty over submission, the more you become immune to their control. You are not a passive subject in their cosmic scheme. You are a spark of divine intelligence, a being of light navigating through shadow. And when you remember that, truly remember it, the system begins to crumble from the inside out. For centuries, the Gnostic teachings were buried, declared heresy, burned from libraries, driven underground by empires, institutions, and religions that feared their power. And yet, like a seed lying dormant beneath the soil, Gnosis never truly died. It waited silently until the time was right. And now, in our modern age of crisis and awakening, it is returning. But why now? Why is the ancient knowledge of the Archons, the Matrix, and spiritual sovereignty rising again from the ashes of forgotten history? Because humanity is reaching a tipping point. The old systems are cracking. The illusions that once held the world together, governments, religions, economies, media narratives, are collapsing under the weight of their own falseness. People are beginning to question everything, their purpose, their identity, their reality. And in that questioning, something ancient stirs. It is the soul's memory of a truth long buried. The Gnostics said that the divine spark within us cannot be extinguished, it only sleeps. And now, as the shadows grow louder, more and more, people are waking up. We are living in an age where information is no longer controlled by the few. The discoveries at Nag Hammadi, once locked away in academic circles, are now accessible with a click. People who have never read a Gnostic gospel can still intuitively sense the same truths, that there is something false in this world, something off, that there is more to life than survival achievement and distraction. This collective intuition is not coincidence, it is resonance. Gnosis is returning not as dogma, but as a frequency, a vibration that calls to those who are ready to remember. And it's not just spiritual seekers feeling this pull. Scientists are exploring consciousness in ways that echo mystical teachings. Quantum physicists are questioning the nature of reality itself. Psychologists are seeing the power of inner awareness over external control. Artists, dreamers, rebels, and healers across the world are stepping into new roles, not as leaders of belief systems, but as bridges between the seen and unseen. The veil is thinning, and as the veil thins, the Archons grow desperate. Their system cannot survive in a world where people think for themselves, feel deeply, and choose presence over programming. But the return of Gnosis is not automatic. It's an invitation, not a guarantee. Each of us must choose whether to awaken or remain sedated, whether to face the uncomfortable truths of our inner and outer worlds, or to keep clinging to the comfort of illusion. The Archons do not fear war or protest. They fear the quiet moment when a human being turns inward and remembers who they are. Because in that moment, the entire system begins to lose its grip. This is why this knowledge is resurfacing now. Because the world is ready. Because you are ready. Gnosis isn't returning to save humanity. It's returning so that humanity can save itself. Not through force or ideology, but through remembrance. The remembrance that you are not broken, not fallen, not separate. You are a spark of the infinite, temporarily wandering through a dream. And once you realize that, the dream can be transformed. So now the choice is yours. You've glimpsed the architecture of the illusion, the archons, the matrix, the layers of control that have shaped your mind, your world, and even your sense of self. But this isn't just a story to entertain your intellect. It's a mirror, a moment of recognition. Because deep down, you've always known this world isn't quite right. That your soul didn't come here just to obey, to consume, to forget. You came here to wake up. The Archons can only rule with your permission. The Matrix only holds you if you stop questioning it. And illusion only survives when you forget your true nature. But within you, there is something untouched, unbroken, eternal, a spark of the divine that existed before this world and will exist long after it. That spark cannot be taken. It can only be forgotten or remembered. The world around you will continue to pull at your attention, tempt you with comfort, distract you with noise. But every breath, every moment of stillness is a doorway back to Gnosis, back to sovereignty, back to truth. You don't need to escape this world. You need to see it clearly. Because once you remember who you truly are, the game changes. You're no longer a pawn, you become the player. You become the light the darkness cannot touch. This is the moment we've been waiting for, not the return of a savior from above, but the rise of awareness from within. You are not here by accident. You are not powerless. You are not alone. The final choice is not out there. It is in you. So take a deep breath, close your eyes, and remember.
You are not alone in your own mind. That sudden drop in energy you felt at 3 o'clock this afternoon was not a biological slump. It was a harvest. Right now, there is a high probability that an inorganic intelligence is tethered to your lower chakras, feeding on your frustration. The Gnostics warned us about this 2,000 years ago in the Nag Hammadi texts, but we dismissed it as mythology. It is not mythology. It is predation. If you click away, you remain a fuel source. You continue to feed a system designed to keep you exhausted, confused, and docile. But if you stay for these 30 minutes, I am going to hand you the keys to your own psychological prison. You will learn not just how to detect them, but how to evict them. Tonight, first, we expose the ancient history of this foreign installation. Then, we decode the biological symptoms, specifically how they hijack your vagus nerve. Finally, and most importantly, I will walk you through the sovereign decree, a removal protocol that breaks the contract permanently. We need to strip away the Hollywood distortion. When we speak of archons, we are not talking about horns and pitchforks. We are speaking of a sophisticated, cybernetic intelligence that exists outside the visible light spectrum. The shaman Don Juan Matus called this the predator that gave us its mind. This is the critical open loop you must understand. They do not just whisper to you, they think for you. They give you a mind that is full of conflict, full of doubt, and prone to repetitive, circular anxiety. Why? Because that anxiety creates a specific frequency. Think of the false matrix, or the frequency fence. This is not a physical wall, but a vibration control system. For thousands of years, this system has been perfected to keep human consciousness vibrating at a very specific, harvestable range. They are not trying to destroy you. A farmer does not destroy his cattle. He keeps them alive, he keeps them fearful, and he keeps them producing. But here is the danger we rarely talk about. This is not just a spiritual haunting. It is a systemic infection. Unlike a ghost that haunts a house, an archon attachment haunts the central nervous system. It integrates. Later in this video, I will show you the exact physical spot on your neck where they dock, often called the mouth of God in esoteric anatomy, but known to them as a feeding port. If you have chronic stiffness there, you are already compromised. To remove the parasite, you must understand its fuel. The technical term is loosh. This is a quantum bioemission that occurs when a sentient being experiences intense, low-frequency emotion. Terror, lust, grief, and blind rage are the delicacies. When you fall into a loop of replaying a past argument in your head, over and over, you are preparing a meal. You are generating energy that you cannot use, but they can. This mechanism relies on the R complex, or the reptilian brain. This is the oldest part of your biological hardware, responsible for survival, aggression, and territoriality. The archons exploit this hardware. They trigger a fight or flight response when there is no physical danger. Have you ever woken up with your heart racing for no reason? That is a phantom cortisol spike. It is an artificial stimulus applied to your etheric body to squeeze out loosh. But the most terrifying mechanism is the counter-mimicry. They cloak themselves as your inner voice. This is why you cannot distinguish between your thoughts and their inserts. They use first-person pronouns. They say, "I am worried," not "you should be worried." This trickery makes you defend the very thought that is draining you. There is a way to break this mimicry, a technique involving generic subjectivity that creates a firewall in your mind. We will get to that in section 4. For now, you need to assess the damage. How deep does the hook go? To know that, we have to look at the 7 specific signs of active attachment, starting with the one that ruins your sleep cycles. You might think an entity attachment is a spiritual problem. something that exists only in the aura or the soul. That is a dangerous misconception. To control a physical vessel, they must hijack a physical interface. That interface is your vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve in your body, the superhighway connecting your brain to your gut, your heart, and your lungs. It is the bridge between the conscious mind and the autonomic body. The Archons do not need to possess your full consciousness. They only need to pluck this string. When they attach, usually at the base of the neck, they send a low-voltage signal down the vagus nerve. This is why so many targeted individuals suffer from unexplained digestive issues, heart palpitations, or sudden shortness of breath. It is not anxiety, it is interference. The signal disrupts the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, and locks you into a chronic, low-grade fight or flight state. Why do they do this? Because a relaxed human does not produce loosh. A relaxed human is chemically useless to them. They need you vibrating at the frequency of survival terror. This leads us to the phenomenon of the phantom cortisol spike. Have you ever woken up between 3 and 4 in the morning, your heart hammering against your ribs, soaked in sweat, with a sense of impending doom? Yet, the house is quiet. There is no intruder. There is no fire. Your body is reacting to a threat that does not exist in the physical reality. This is a harvest event. They have stimulated your adrenal glands remotely to create a burst of chemical energy they can siphon. You go back to sleep exhausted, feeling drained, while they are fully fed. But the physical drain is just the softening up process. Once the body is tired and the nervous system is frayed, they move to the primary target, your internal monologue. This is where the infection becomes almost impossible to detect unless you know the 3-word rule, which I will explain shortly. The greatest trick the Archon ever pulled was convincing you that its voice is your voice. We assume that every thought appearing in our head is generated by us. This is the fatal error. The Archon is a mimic. It studies your vocabulary, your cadence, and your insecurities. It then injects thoughts that sound exactly like you, but their intent is foreign. How do you distinguish the intruder from the host? You look for the first-person deception. When you make a mistake, your organic consciousness might think, "That was a mistake. I should fix it." That is constructive. The Archon voice, however, will say, "I am stupid. I always mess this up. I am worthless." Notice the pronoun I. They use I to trick you into claiming the thought as your own. If they whispered, "You are worthless," your natural defenses would go up. You would reject the insult, but by saying I, they bypass the firewall. You accept the self-hatred because you think you are generating it. You are not. You are being ventriloquized. This leads to the looping mechanism. Organic human thought is linear or creative. It moves from problem to solution. Archontic thought is circular. It is a loop that leads nowhere. Think of the last time you obsessed over an awkward conversation or a fear of the future. Did you solve it? No. You replayed the same 3 scenarios 500 times until you were mentally paralyzed. That paralysis is the goal. The loop generates a friction energy, a static charge of frustration that is highly potent fuel. They will keep you on that carousel for days if you let them. But here is the catch. You cannot just stop thinking. That is impossible for most people. Instead, you have to tag the thought. You have to identify the code signature of the parasite. In the next section, we are going to walk through the 7 signs. These are the undeniable, physical, and environmental red flags that confirm an attachment is active right now. If you have experienced the solar plexus knot or the twilight drop-off, you need to pay very close attention to what comes next. Because if you have more than 3 of these signs, you are not just being watched, you are being farmed. Now, we move from theory to diagnosis. You might be telling yourself, "This is interesting, but surely I am not infected." That is the first defense mechanism of the parasite, concealment. They rely on your disbelief to remain hidden, but they cannot hide their footprints. When an inorganic entity interfaces with organic biology, it leaves residue. It creates friction. We are going to go through the 7 advanced signs. These are not vague feelings. These are specific, observable patterns. If you recognize more than 3 of these, the probability of attachment is near 100%. And the 6th sign, the physical sensation in the stomach, is the one that usually confirms the tether is not just mental, but biological. Sign number 1 is the cyclical energy crash. I am not talking about the post-lunch slump or normal fatigue. I am talking about a sudden, violent drain of your vitality that happens at the exact same time every day. For many, this occurs around 3 in the afternoon or right at twilight. Why these times? Because these are transition points in the etheric grid. Twilight is the thinnest time between dimensions. If you feel like someone pulled the plug on your life force, leaving you barely able to keep your eyes open, and then an hour later you are suddenly wide awake again, you have just survived a feeding cycle. They drained the tank, and once they were full, they detached, allowing your natural energy to return. Sign number 2 is controversial: false synchronicities. In the New Age community, we are taught that seeing repeating numbers like 111 or 333 is always a sign of angel guidance. This is not always true. The Archons control the matrix construct, which means they can manipulate the digital layer of reality. If you are seeing signs that lead you into confusion, bad investments, or toxic relationships, those are not from your guides. That is a breadcrumbing tactic. They are leading you into a maze. If a synchronicity creates anxiety or obsession rather than peace, it is a trap. It is a glitch, designed to waste your time. But how do they manipulate these electrical signals? That brings us to the 3rd sign, which manifests in your literal hardware. Sign number 3 is technomancy. Archons are by nature electromagnetic entities. They are composed of charged frequencies. When a high-level attachment is agitated, perhaps because you are meditating or watching a video like this, they emit a chaotic field that disrupts local electronics. Do streetlights turn off when you walk under them? Does your phone battery drain from 50% to 0 in minutes when you are having an emotional breakthrough? Do Wi-Fi signals drop only when you are researching spiritual topics? This is not bad luck. This is their aura crashing against your technology. They are trying to sever your connection to information. Sign number 4 is the dream invader. We all have nightmares, but an Archon dream is distinct. It feels muddy. The lighting in the dream is often dim, gray, or yellow. You try to run, but your legs feel like lead. You try to scream, but you have no voice. These are testing grounds. They are scenarios generated to extract fear loosh from you while your conscious guard is down. The telltale sign is the lucidity failure. You might realize you are dreaming, but unlike a normal lucid dream where you take control, in these dreams, you are suppressed. You wake up feeling more exhausted than when you went to bed. Sign number 5 is the proxy attack. This is one of the most painful signs. Have you ever been having a wonderful day with a partner or family member, and suddenly, out of nowhere, they say something specifically designed to trigger your deepest insecurity? Their eyes might even seem to gloss over or change color for a split second. You react, they react, and suddenly, you are in a 3-hour fight over nothing. You feel like you are watching a script play out. That is because it is a script. The entity is using the other person as a proxy to harvest loosh from you. They are pushing buttons to get an explosion. If you notice your loved ones acting out of character only when you are in a high vibration state, you are being targeted by proxy. Sign number 6 is the physical anchor, the solar plexus knot. This is the sensation of a tight, cold knot right below your rib cage. It feels like fear, but there is nothing to be afraid of. You can breathe deep, you can stretch, but the knot does not loosen. This is the primary feeding tube. The solar plexus is your power center. It is where your will is generated. They attach here to siphon your ambition. If you have this chronic knot, you often feel a sense of dread or nausea in the mornings. This is the physical evidence of the parasite, but the damage to your will leads to the final and most dangerous sign. Sign number 7 is spiritual apathy. This is the ultimate goal of the ARCHON. It is the sudden, heavy feeling that none of this matters. You used to be passionate about truth, about meditation, about freedom. Now, you just want to scroll on your phone and sleep. You feel a heavy blanket of indifference. This is not depression. This is a frequency dampener. They are suppressing your natural drive to ascend, because if you raise your vibration too high, you become poisonous to them. They need you low, slow, and docile. If you feel this apathy right now, if you feel a resistance to finishing this video, that is them pulling on the leash. They know that in the next section, I am going to give you the exact words, the sovereign decree that burns that leash to ash. They do not want you to hear what comes next. They want you to click off. Do not let them win. We are about to break the contract. We have arrived at the removal. This is the part of the video the algorithm usually suppresses, because this is where you stop being a victim and start being a threat to the system. But before we speak the words of eviction, we must address the battlefield. 90% of people who attempt this protocol fail within 24 hours. Why? Because they try to perform high-level etheric surgery in a dirty room. You must understand that Archons are agents of entropy. They thrive on chaos, decay, and filth. If your room is cluttered, if there is dust in the corners, if your laundry is piled up, you have created a sanctuary for them. You cannot banish a parasite of chaos from a temple of chaos. Step 1 is physical hygiene. You must shower. Water is not just physical. It is diamagnetic. It scrubs the static charge from your aura. As the water hits you, visualize the gray slime of the day washing down the drain. Step 2 is environmental order. Clean your space. Create a vacuum of order that is hostile to their vibration. Step 3 is the sonic barrier. Silence is not always your friend here, because in silence, their whispers are loudest. You need to play a frequency of 417 Hz. This specific tone is known to undo situations and facilitate change. It breaks the resonant frequency of the attachment, loosening its grip on your solar plexus. But a clean room and a specific sound frequency are just the preparation. They create the space, but they do not do the work. To actually sever the cord, you must use the only weapon that holds authority in this dimension, the law of dominion. But simply saying the words is not enough. You have to activate them with a specific emotional signature, or nothing will happen. We are now going to execute the revocation of contracts. You must understand that these entities do not have the right to be there unless you gave it to them. You likely agreed to this attachment, perhaps in a moment of trauma, or perhaps before you were even born, tricked by the lords of karma to accept a heavy burden. We are going to burn that contract now. You cannot think these words. You must speak them out loud. Your voice creates a standing wave in reality, and you must not ask. You must command. If you ask, please leave, you are validating their power. You are a sovereign creator god. You do not beg the fleas to leave the dog. You evict them. I want you to stand up. Place your hand over your solar plexus. Feel the heat there. Repeat this script with absolute conviction. If you feel your voice shaking, that is them trying to stop you. Push through it. Say this: I call upon my higher self and the source of all that is. I hereby revoke, rescind, and dissolve all agreements, contracts, and entrapments, known and unknown. that I have made with any entity, timeline, or institution that does not have my absolute highest good as its sole intent. Take a breath. Feel the resistance. Push harder. I am a sovereign being of the organic light. You are unauthorized. You are evicted. I cut all cords, all tethers, and all feeding tubes to the false matrix. I return all karma that is not mine to its sender. You have no dominion here. Leave. Now. Say it 3 times. The rule of 3 acts as a confirmation code in the etheric programming language. By the 3rd time, you should feel a physical sensation, a lightness, a shiver, or a sudden release of pressure in the stomach. That is the detachment. But here is the danger no one warns you about: the re-entry shock. Once you kick them out, there is a vacuum. The space where they were attached is raw and open. If you do not immediately fill that space with your own energy, they will rush back in with 10 times the aggression. How do you stop the counterattack? You have to learn the art of starvation. The eviction is the easy part. Keeping them out is the war. The moment you finish the revocation, the entity will try to reattach. It will do this by triggering an emotional spike. You might suddenly feel a wave of intense anger, or a sudden, crushing sadness. You might drop a glass and break it. You might get a text message that infuriates you. This is the test. They are checking to see if you are still reactive. If you react with emotion, you create a fresh hook, and they latch right back on. You must deploy the starvation method. This is the practice of radical neutrality. When the negative thought comes, and it will come, you must treat it like a pop-up ad on a computer screen. You do not argue with a pop-up ad. You do not get angry at it. You simply close it. When the voice says, "You are a failure," you do not fight it. You observe it. You say internally, "I see this thought. It is an interesting suggestion, but I do not accept it." You starve it of the one thing it needs: your emotional identification. By refusing to spike your cortisol, you become like dry sand to a leech. There is nothing to grab onto. You become invisible to them. Practice this tonight. When the anxiety rises, become a scientist observing a specimen. Watch the anxiety. Ask it, "Who sent you?" Watch it dissolve under your gaze. However, even with the starvation method, your energy field is still porous. You have holes in your aura from years of predation. You are currently walking through a toxic environment without a hazmat suit. To make this permanent, you need to build the 12th dimensional shield around your body. Without this final step, you are just a sitting duck waiting for the next parasite. In the final section, I will show you how to seal the aura so tight that nothing inorganic can ever penetrate it again. You have revoked the contract. You have starved the reaction. Now, you stand in the vacuum. This is the most critical moment of your safety. You are like a deep-sea diver who has shed their heavy, rusted armor, but has not yet put on the new suit. The pressure of the ocean, the collective unconscious of billions of sleeping, traumatized humans, is pushing in on you. If you walk out into the world now without protection, you will absorb the negativity of every person you pass on the street. You need the 12th dimensional shield. Most people visualize white light. In advanced metaphysics, white light can sometimes be part of the visible light spectrum trap, the same light seen at the end of the tunnel. We are going deeper. We are using platinum light. Close your eyes. Visualize a 6-pointed star, 6 inches above your head. See it spinning clockwise. From the center of this star, a pillar of liquid platinum light pours down. It does not just coat your skin, it moves through you. It flushes the gray static out of your cells and pushes it down into the earth to be recycled. Now, see that pillar expanding 4 feet around you in every direction. Below your feet, a golden disc forms, sealing the bottom. You are now inside a sealed, hermetic column. This is your sovereign territory. Nothing enters this space without your explicit permission. But a shield is passive. You need active repair. Think of your aura like a fabric. Every time you engaged in toxic arguments, doom scrolling, or self-hatred in the past, you tore holes in that fabric. These tears are entry points. Visualize a needle made of blue laser light, threaded with gold filament. Mentally sew up the edges of your energy field. See the holes closing. See the gold thread knitting your protection back together until you are sitting in a seamless egg of light. This is not a one-and-done exercise. You brush your teeth every morning to remove physical bacteria. You must build this shield every single morning to repel etheric bacteria. If you skip a day, you are walking into a biohazard zone naked. We have covered the history, the biological symptoms, the removal decree, and the shielding. But I have to leave you with one final, dangerous truth. A truth that the Archons spend all of their energy trying to hide from you. They are terrified of you. We look at the system, the government, the media, the financial matrix, and we feel small. We feel like ants fighting a giant. But from an energetic perspective, the dynamic is reversed. You are a fractal of the original source. You generate energy. You create reality. You are a sun. They are inorganic. They cannot create. They can only copy. They cannot generate fuel. They can only steal it. They are not lions hunting gazelles. They are ticks waiting for a dog. A tick is not powerful. It is just persistent. The moment you realize that you are the food source, you realize that you hold the power. If you stop feeding them, they starve. If you stop fearing them, they dissolve. The only power they have is the power you surrender to them through your own ignorance. Tonight, you have a choice. You can turn this video off, go back to your old loops, and let the parasite feast on your anxiety for another 10 years. Or you can stand up, speak the decree of revocation, and reclaim your mind. The cage door is open. It has always been open. All you have to do is walk out. Do the protocol tonight. Do not wait for the right time. The right time is now, and once you are free, you will realize that this attachment was just the first layer of the onion. There are deeper programs, ancestral karma, DNA locks that we need to clear next. But you cannot fight those battles until you win this one. See you in the next video.
Archons don't always feel dark or threatening. In fact, they often feel familiar, almost comfortable. Because they don't enter your life through fear, they enter through wounds. It usually begins after you've been around someone who made you question your worth. A person who made you feel small. Every moment you were undervalued, every time you held back your voice, every time you shrank yourself just to keep the peace. Those moments create an internal echo. And eventually, you start repeating their voice as if it's your own. That echo is the Archon. That's where it attaches. Not to your soul, but to the parts of you that learn to doubt yourself. And once it's there, it begins shifting how you see your life, your energy, your choices, quietly reshaping everything from the inside out. Before anything shows up in your energy, it starts somewhere much more ordinary, in your real life. These attachments don't crash into your aura like some monster. They grow slowly in the cracks of your experiences. And there are a few specific gateways where they slip in almost every time. One of the biggest is getting pulled into the same toxic relationships over and over again. You know the ones, the people who drain you emotionally, make you doubt yourself, or make you feel like you're never doing enough. Every time you go back to someone who diminishes you, a small part of you opens up, and something unwelcome can take root in that space. Another entrance point is unresolved pain you've been carrying for years, unprocessed anger, old wounds, buried humiliation. These aren't just memories, they become open doors. What you refuse to face will find a way to feed off you. And that's exactly where this energy begins to gather, right in the parts of you that never got a chance to heal. Then there's the trap of endless spiritual searching with no grounding. When you're constantly looking for the next meaning, the next sign, the next awakening, without ever integrating what you've already learned, you create a kind of gap between who you are and who you think you should be. That gap becomes incredibly vulnerable to outside influence. And finally, one of the sneakiest gateways, obsessing over being pure or perfect. The moment your spiritual journey becomes a performance instead of a path, you weaken your sense of self. Perfection isn't enlightenment, it's self-erasure. And that erasure is exactly where these attachments are born. All of these experiences create the same outcome, a mental echo, a quiet inner voice that doesn't sound like you, but slowly starts to guide your reactions, your fears, and your choices. That echo is the birthplace of the attachment, and most people never even notice when it begins, but you will, once you know what it sounds like. Now let's get into the signs, the ones that don't look supernatural at all. They look like your own thoughts, but the intensity behind them is the giveaway. The most obvious sign is becoming excessively self-critical for no real reason. Not the normal kind of self-doubt, the kind that hits out of nowhere, even on days when nothing went wrong. You might catch yourself tearing yourself apart for tiny mistakes, hating the way you speak, the way you look, or the way you show up in the world. When the inner critic sounds harsher than you've ever been toward yourself, that's not just insecurity. That's an influence feeding on your lowest perception of yourself. When your inner voice becomes your enemy, it's not your voice anymore. Another sign is when you can't stop replaying past conversations, especially ones where someone embarrassed you, dismissed you, or made you feel small. You're not choosing to relive those moments. Something in you keeps dragging them back to the surface. It's like a loop that refuses to end, no matter how much time passes. These aren't random habits. These loops are fueled by residual emotional energy that didn't originally belong to you. When someone disrespected you, their energy left an imprint. When you internalized it, the attachment formed around that imprint and kept it alive. Most people think these patterns are just their personality. They think it's just how they are now. But once you see the pattern for what it really is, the entire story changes. And you start realizing just how much of your inner world has been shaped by something that was never yours in the first place. These attachments don't survive on their own. They need fuel, and more often than not, that fuel comes from the people you continue to allow into your life. Even if the original person who made you doubt yourself is long gone, the emotional imprint they left behind doesn't disappear automatically. It lingers, waiting for someone, anyone, to keep feeding it. And this is where patterns become dangerous. Think about the people you interact with regularly, not the obvious enemies, but the subtle drainers, the friend who jokes about your goals like they're unrealistic, the relative who downplays your achievements because they're secretly threatened, the partner who pretends to support you, but always redirects the conversation to themselves. These small jabs add up. Every dismissal, every passive-aggressive comment, every moment someone makes you second-guess your progress becomes a recharge point for the same energy that first attached to you. It goes deeper than just toxic behavior. Sometimes it's the people who want you to stay exactly where you are because your growth will disrupt their comfort. They don't need to say it outright. You can feel it. They keep you insecure because your insecurity benefits them. If you doubt yourself, you won't outgrow them. If you stay exhausted, you won't set boundaries. If you feel lost, you'll rely on them more. The attachment thrives on that dynamic. This is where awareness becomes your compass. Start asking yourself the real question. Who benefits when I stay insecure? Who gains when I shrink? Who feels comfortable when I silence myself? The answers might surprise you because they reveal exactly where the energy keeps getting recharged. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The attachment doesn't just live in you. It lives in the environment that keeps the old wound alive. When you identify those patterns, you're not just noticing who drains you. You're identifying the ecosystem that keeps the entire cycle running. That's when the shift begins. Now here's the part most people never hear. These attachments collapse the moment you start living in a way that aligns with who you truly are. They feed on distortion, confusion, double standards, and half-truths. So when you begin stepping into your real values, even in quiet ways, the attachment loses its oxygen. These entities can't breathe where there's truth. Integrity isn't perfection, and it isn't moral performance. Integrity is simply the commitment to live in a way that matches your inner reality. When you start speaking honestly, choosing clearly, and honoring what you actually feel, the energy that once fed on your uncertainty begins to starve. Every time you show yourself compassion instead of criticism, the attachment weakens. Self-love is not just healing. Self-love is a weapon. Look at the small promises you make to yourself. Waking up at a certain time, finishing a task, protecting your peace, choosing rest when your body needs it. Every time you follow through, you rebuild the inner world where these attachments can't survive. They thrive in broken commitments because broken commitments reinforce the narrative that you can't trust yourself. But once you begin keeping your word, even in small ways, you create a spiritual environment rooted in self-respect. Then there's the power of saying no when you mean no, not pretending you're okay with something, not forcing yourself to be agreeable, not sacrificing your needs to avoid disappointing people who wouldn't do the same for you. When you honor your boundaries, you disrupt the emotional patterns that allowed the attachment to survive in the first place. And perhaps the most powerful thing, being honest about what you really want. Not what you think you should want, not what others told you to want, but what actually feels like your path. Desires align you with your purpose, and purpose is something no attachment can latch onto. When you start admitting your truth, even silently to yourself, The energy that once manipulated your doubts disappears like smoke. These aren't just self-improvement ideas. These are acts of spiritual liberation. Integrity, truth, and self-love dismantle the very structure these attachments depend on. And every time you choose yourself, even in the smallest way, something inside you wakes up and remembers its power. The moment you decide to remove this influence begins with something incredibly simple: noticing the thoughts that keep shrinking you. Not the normal doubts everyone has, but the ones that feel strangely familiar, as if they were planted there long before you ever questioned them. When a thought makes you feel small, pause and ask yourself where it actually came from. Was it yours? Or did someone put it there years ago and you kept carrying it because no one ever told you that you didn't have to? Once you recognize that the voice inside your head doesn't fully belong to you, everything begins shifting. This is where you start rewriting the script. Say the thing you needed to hear in those old moments. The words you never received, the validation that was missing, the truth that should have been spoken. Healing begins the moment you give yourself the sentence they never said. Every time you replace their message with your own, you weaken the hold that energy has on you. And when a thought tries to pull you down, don't let it run unchecked. Question it. Challenge it. Ask, can you prove that? The moment you interrogate that voice, it loses authority. The attachment was never strong because it was powerful. It was strong because you believed it without questioning it. Once you shine light on where these thoughts came from, they stop feeling like truth and start looking like the residue they really are. Now comes the most important part, realizing that this was the intention all along. That shrinking feeling, that was the outcome someone wanted from you. They wanted you insecure. They wanted you uncertain. They wanted you to believe you were the problem so they could stay comfortable in their role. And you can't give them that anymore. When you stop performing for someone else's comfort, you reclaim every part of yourself they tried to dim. The only reason this influence affects you now is because you didn't know the origin of the thoughts pressing down on you. But once you recognize that they aren't yours, the entire structure collapses. You stop accepting the blame. You stop absorbing the shame. You stop mistaking someone else's voice for your intuition. You finally see the separation. And that is where freedom begins. Refuse to carry what was never yours. Say it internally or out loud. I'm not holding someone else's shame. That's not mine. And the moment you say it, you cut the final thread that kept their energy alive inside you. Tonight isn't about rituals or cleansing or complicated steps. It's about reclaiming the space in your mind that was borrowed by a voice that never had the right to be there in the first place. One of the most overlooked ways this lingering energy affects you is through your focus. Not in dramatic ways, not through chaos or breakdowns, but through subtle mental noise that creeps in exactly when you're trying to move forward. You sit down to think clearly. You try to create something. You try to organize your life, make a plan, commit to a new chapter, and suddenly your mind fills with doubts, pointless distractions, or an urge to scroll for no reason. It's not loud enough to feel suspicious, but it's consistent enough to keep you stuck. This is not random. When someone's emotional imprint lives in your mind, it clutters your internal space. It hijacks your attention and redirects it toward anything that prevents clarity. You might feel mentally tired before you even begin, or overwhelmed by tasks you normally handle easily. You may find yourself forgetting what you were about to do, or losing momentum as soon as inspiration hits. It's like trying to think in a room full of whispers. Nothing loud enough to identify, but just enough noise to scatter your concentration. The tricky part is that this interference feels natural. You think you're just being unproductive, unfocused, lazy, or lacking discipline. But the truth is much deeper. Your attention is being drained by emotional energy you never agreed to keep. Distraction isn't weakness. It's often the residue of a story that wasn't yours to carry. These lingering echoes behave like background processes, running quietly while you try to function, pulling on your energy like a hidden weight. And when someone's past words live rent-free in your head, they don't just influence how you feel. They influence how much you can do. They shape your capacity to focus, imagine, create, or believe in yourself. You try to move forward, but you're dragging emotional debris that keeps pulling you back into old versions of yourself. That's why clearing these attachments isn't just about feeling better. It's about reclaiming your mental real estate. The moment you realize your focus has been under quiet attack, you start taking it personally in the right way. You stop blaming yourself for the noise and start recognizing what caused it. And that shift of awareness alone rewrites the entire dynamic. Because once you identify what's stealing your focus, you can finally take it back. When you finally get close to breaking free of this influence, there's always one final strategy it tries to use. And it's the most convincing one of all. It isn't fear, and it isn't doubt. It's isolation. Not the physical kind, but the emotional illusion that convinces you no one understands you, no one relates to you, and no one would stay if they saw the real you. It shows up as that subtle inner voice saying, "You're too different, you're too weird, you're on your own now." And that voice feels personal because it uses your insecurities as the foundation for the lie. But that voice is the last desperate attempt to stop you from stepping into your own power. It's the same old script, trying to convince you that the moment you evolve, you lose everyone. It wants you to believe that growth separates you, that clarity isolates you, and that healing somehow pushes you out of the world. Nothing could be further from the truth. The only thing you're outgrowing is the version of yourself that tolerated what drained you in the first place. Isolation is the last card because it's the most effective one. If you feel alone, you're more likely to shrink back into familiar patterns. If you feel misunderstood, you're more likely to silence yourself again. And if you silence yourself, the attachment survives. That's why the idea of being too different gets whispered right at the point where you're reclaiming your identity. When you step into your truth, you don't lose people. You lose the people who needed you powerless. You are not isolated. You are not strange. You are not behind everyone else. You are simply stepping into a level of self-awareness that most people never reach because they're too afraid to confront the parts of themselves you've already started facing. You're not alone. You're ahead of the curve. The moment you realize this, the illusion of isolation collapses, and what's left is the recognition that you're carrying a light others haven't discovered yet. Instead of shrinking, this is the time to expand. Instead of questioning yourself, this is the time to validate yourself. You're not meant to fit into the environments where your old wounds were created. You're meant to grow beyond them. And once you accept that, the last trick loses all its power. You stop looking back and you walk into a version of yourself that no influence can reach. You were never broken. Nothing about you was too damaged, too complicated, or too far gone. You weren't behind in life, and you weren't failing some invisible test. You were simply interrupted. Someone handed you a story about yourself, a story built on their perception, and you carried it because no one ever told you that you were allowed to drop it. You were not hard to love. You were taught to love yourself through someone else's lens. Once you understand that, the entire narrative changes. The things you thought were flaws were survival strategies. The moments you felt stuck weren't signs of weakness. They were signs that your inner world had been tampered with by energy that didn't belong to you. That heaviness you carried wasn't your truth. It was a script written by someone who didn't see your worth clearly enough. But now, everything is shifting. You're catching the thoughts that don't belong to you. And if you're still here, still watching, thank you. If even one part of this helped you understand your own thoughts a little better, if it made something click or brought you a bit of clarity, then you're already breaking patterns that were never meant to define you. You're not trapped. You're not cursed. You're just waking up to what's been shaping you, and awakening always comes with power. So as you move through the rest of your day or night, go gently. You don't need to fight yourself. You don't need to rush the process, and you definitely don't need to carry anything that isn't yours anymore. And if you enjoyed this, or it resonated in any way, feel free to leave a like on the video. Take care of yourself.